Cursed Cassettes presents.
I'd been working the night shift at McDonald's for about 6 months, and let me tell you, it wasn't for the faint of heart. The late hours could be quiet, but when things went wrong, they could go horribly wrong. One particular night, around 2 a.m, a group of teenagers came in. They were loud, a mix of laughter and chaos as they ordered their food, clearly just out for a late night adventure. I was behind the counter, trying to keep my energy up, when they finally settled at a booth in the corner. I thought nothing of it, just another group of kids looking to hang out. About 20 minutes later, one of them approached the counter. He looked nervous, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly. My heart started to race when he placed a tray on the counter and said, "I found something in my burger." I looked at the tray and my stomach dropped. Sticking out of the bun was a syringe needle. "What the hell is this?" I stammered, trying to remain calm, even though my mind was racing. "Are you serious?" He nodded, looking more terrified than I felt. I immediately called my manager, my hands shaking as I relayed the situation. Meanwhile, the other teens began to gather around, whispering and glancing at me like they were in on some secret joke. I could hear the sounds of laughter coming from the booth as I hung up the phone, waiting for the police to arrive. The atmosphere shifted. It felt electric with tension. I offered to replace the meal, trying to calm the situation, but they demanded a refund instead. That's when things started to escalate. "You guys need to chill out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but they were agitated, arguing amongst themselves and yelling at me. I felt trapped behind the counter as they started to gather closer, their eyes glinting with a mix of adrenaline and mischief. Just as I thought I might pass out from anxiety, the police arrived. The mood shifted instantly. Their authoritative presence commanded respect. They started taking statements, asking questions. But as the officers began their inquiries, something felt off. One officer turned to me, a puzzled expression crossing his face. "You said you found this in a burger?" he asked, eyeing the tray. "Yeah," I replied, my voice trembling. "That kid said he found it in his food." But the longer I stood there, the more I noticed the group. They were fidgeting, looking at each other with nervous glances, and then, without warning, they bolted for the door. "Hey, stop!" one of the officers yelled, and they took off running. Panic surged through me as I watched them sprint away into the night. It was chaos. The officers quickly pursued, and I could hear their shouts fading as they chased the teens down the street. The restaurant felt eerily quiet after they left, the air thick with confusion and tension. A few minutes later, the officers returned, breathless but triumphant. They had caught the group just a block away, and the look on their faces was a mix of anger and disbelief. "Turns out this wasn't the first time these kids have pulled something like this," one of the officers said, shaking his head. "They've been causing problems all over town, staging similar pranks to extort money from restaurants." My heart sank as the reality hit me. These kids weren't just trouble. They were seasoned con artists. As the officers questioned them, the truth came to light. They had planted the needle themselves, hoping to get free meals or cash in on a lawsuit. The police found out they had been doing the same thing at other fast food places, and it had finally caught up with them. I watched as they were cuffed and led away, their laughter from earlier now replaced with panic and anger. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was also accompanied by a heavy realization of how close we had come to a much darker outcome. In the aftermath, our restaurant received a thorough inspection, and the health department found no evidence of contamination. The news of the incident spread quickly, and funny enough, brought in more customers as they were curious about what had happened. I had been working the night shift at McDonald's for a few months when a night came that would stay with me for a long time. It was a slow Tuesday evening, the kind where you wonder why you even bother coming in. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I wiped down the counter. watching the clock tick slowly toward the end of my shift. Around 8:30 p.m., a woman walked in with her child. The little boy was bouncing with energy, his face lighting up when he saw the Happy Meal poster on the wall. "Mummy, can I get a Happy Meal?" he squealed, tugging at her sleeve. She nodded and they approached the counter. I smiled and took their order, feeling a sense of relief that at least someone had come in to break the monotony. I handed over the Happy Meal with a smile, the boy's eyes wide with excitement as he clutched his toy. I felt a sense of pride knowing I was part of making his night a little brighter, but what happened next shattered that feeling completely. About 20 minutes later, the woman stormed back into the restaurant, her face flushed with anger. "Excuse me," she shouted, drawing the attention of the few other customers in the restaurant. "I need to speak to a manager right now." I could feel my stomach drop as I glanced over at my manager, who was in the back. I can help you. What seems to be the problem?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She thrust the Happy Meal bag at me, her voice dripping with fury. "There's a foreign object in my son's food. I want a refund immediately." Her child stood beside her, looking confused and a little scared. "What do you mean by foreign object?" I asked, trying to understand what had happened. She rolled her eyes as if my question was the most absurd thing she had ever heard. "There was something in the fries. I can't believe you would serve this to a child." She glanced at her son, who was now wide-eyed, clutching his toy and looking up at her. I opened the bag and examined the contents, but everything looked normal. "Ma'am, I don't see anything wrong here. Would you like me to replace the fries?" I offered, hoping to defuse the situation. "No, I want my money back," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "You think I'm going to let this slide? I could sue you for this." My heart raced as I felt the eyes of the other customers on me. The last thing I wanted was a scene in the restaurant, especially one that could escalate further. "Ma'am, I assure you, we take food safety very seriously. I can replace the meal or offer you a refund, but I need to see what you found first." The woman's face twisted with rage. "You think I'm making this up? This isn't some kind of joke." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You don't want to mess with me. I've done this before." Those words sent a chill down my spine. I felt violated, like she was trying to exploit my hard work for a quick buck. "I understand you're upset, but I need you to be reasonable. We're here to help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She crossed her arms, staring at me as if she could intimidate me into submission. "Reasonable? You call serving my child food with a foreign object in it reasonable? If you don't give me my money back right now, I will make sure this place is shut down." Just then, my manager came out from the back, sensing the tension. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "This employee thinks I'm lying about finding something in my son's food," the woman snapped, pointing a finger at me. My manager raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry to hear that. Can you please show us what you found?" The woman hesitated, glancing at her son, who looked more frightened than ever. I didn't bring it with me," she stammered, her bravado wavering. "But I know what I saw. Without evidence, it's difficult for us to take action," my manager said gently. "If you'd like, I can replace the meal or give you a refund, but we need to keep our policies in place." The woman's face turned red with anger. "You're all in on it together. This is outrageous," she screamed, drawing the attention of the few remaining customers. I could feel their eyes boring into me, and I wanted nothing more than to disappear. Suddenly, the little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, his voice small and uncertain. "Mummy, can we just go? I want to play with my toy." The woman hesitated, her expression softening for a brief moment as she looked down at her son. But the anger quickly returned, and she turned back to my manager. "This isn't over. I'm going to contact corporate and report this whole incident. You'll regret this." With that, she grabbed her son's hand and stormed out of the restaurant, the door slamming behind them. I let out a shaky breath, my heart still racing from the confrontation. My manager turned to me, her expression a mix of concern and frustration. "Are you okay?" she asked, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm fine. I can't believe that just happened," I replied, still trying to process the whirlwind of emotions. We spent the rest of the night cleaning up and talking about the incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling of violation that lingered in the air. I learned that night how quickly a simple complaint could turn into a nightmare. Over the next few days, I kept expecting to hear from corporate or to see the woman return, but thankfully, nothing ever came of it. Working the night shift at McDonald's was never what I would call glamorous. The hours dragged on, and the store was mostly empty, with only a handful of late-night customers trickling in for their greasy fix. Most nights, it was just me and my co-worker Sarah trying to keep ourselves awake and entertained until the clock hit 4 a.m. But one night, everything changed. It was a chilly Friday night, around 11 p.m. The restaurant was nearly deserted, save for a couple of teenagers sharing fries in the corner booth, and an older man nursing a cup of coffee at the counter. The hum of the fryers and the soft music playing over the speakers created a familiar backdrop, lulling me into a sense of complacency. Suddenly the door swung open, and I looked up to see a man step inside. At first, I thought he was just another late-night customer, but then I noticed the ski mask pulled over his face. My heart sank as he strode toward the counter, a glint of metal catching the light in his hand. "Get back!" he shouted, brandishing a knife that seemed too big for his hand. Panic surged through me like an electric shock. I froze, my mind racing as I processed what was happening. Was this real? Was I about to be robbed right here in front of everyone? "Open the register!" he barked, his voice shaking slightly with adrenaline. The man looked unhinged, his eyes wild beneath the mask. I glanced at Sarah, who stood frozen in shock beside me, her mouth agape. Okay, I stammered, fumbling with the register. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely press the buttons. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there and comply with his demands. But I knew better. I had seen enough crime shows to know that escalating the situation could lead to violence. As the cash drawer opened with a ding, I grabbed the bills and started stuffing them into a plastic bag I'd grabbed from under the counter. The man leaned over the counter, his eyes fixated on the money as if it were the only thing that mattered in the world. "Faster!" he yelled, the desperation in his voice sending chills down my spine. I could see the knife glinting in the light, and for a split second, I thought about reaching for something, anything, to defend myself. But the fear paralyzed me, and I couldn't move. "Please, just take the money and go," I pleaded, my voice trembling. I shoved the bag toward him, hoping to defuse the situation. He snatched it out of my hands, his grip tightening around the knife, as if it were a lifeline. Just then, I heard a sound that made my heart leap into my throat. The door swung open again, and a new customer walked in, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding in front of them. The robber turned to face the newcomer, panic flaring in his eyes. "Get out!" he shouted, waving the knife wildly. The new customer froze, confusion etched on his face as he glanced between us. "Get out of here, now!" The customer didn't need to be told twice. He turned and bolted for the door, yelling for help as he disappeared into the night. The robber turned back to me, his expression shifting from panic to fury. "Why did you let him in?" he demanded, his voice rising in intensity. "You think this is a joke? You think I'm playing?" "I didn't know," I cried, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe this was happening. My mind raced with thoughts of what could go wrong in an instant. "Just take the money and leave, please." For a moment, it felt like time stood still. I could see the inner turmoil on his face as he wrestled with what to do next. The police sirens rang in the background. With a panicked growl, he bolted out the door with a strong shove that cracked the glass door. I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. My legs felt like jelly and I could barely breathe. The adrenaline coursed through me, and I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. What just happened? Sarah trembled, finally breaking the silence. Her eyes were wide with fear, and I could see she was just as shaken as I was. I don't know, I replied, trying to steady my breathing. He just robbed us. It felt like an eternity before the police arrived, but in reality, it was only a few minutes. The police stormed into the restaurant, their presence a welcome relief. I rushed to explain everything, still shaking from the encounter. The officers took our statements, and I could see the concern etched on their faces. "We'll do everything we can to find him," one of the officers assured us. But I couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. The robbery was just a few minutes of terror, but it felt like a lifetime had passed. After they left, I locked up the restaurant, my heart still racing. The smell of fries and burgers, once comforting, now felt suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling of being violated, as if someone had stolen not just our money but our sense of safety. In the days that followed, the police did apprehend the man. Apparently, he needed the money to buy beers and drugs. The incident has left me shaken. I became hyper-aware of every customer who walked through the door. I never forgot the feeling of fear and vulnerability I experienced that night.